the Jananu Show. We're going to be breaking down pieces from the last segment in which we were speaking on the acts of creation, as well as starting these videos and tutorials that we will again put and connect the dots together from ancient Egypt to the Cam, which is Kemet, which is black, and to our studies as to where and how we got to where we are today in our Western civilization. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and push record on both elements here. But before I do that, I want to see if you guys can see this chart behind me. It's a really cool chart. So what this is, if you see it on my videos on YouTube, this is what we're going to break down again today. And it is the Netarus. And they're pretty much in Western lingo called the angels or deities. And when it comes to ancient African knowledge in Cam and Kemet, we call them the Netarus. So, as you can see in my chart, this is what we call it as the Kabbalah or the Netaru. The Pa'u Netaru. The Pa'u Netaru or the Kemets, we'll get into the name of the Kemets, or they're also called the Netarus, the Yarbos, Orishas, again known to Westerners are as angels and the deities. So you may have heard some of my videos referring to them as the deities. Again, we're all learning and changing names as we continue to go, but the one thing we will make sure we remember them as they are called the Netars. So that's very important to make sure there's a translation and a difference. As I was putting up before, when it comes to defining each of who the Netars are in relation to the angels, deities, because the Netars are the deities. Deities are the Netarus. So, same duties, a little bit more in depth, and that's why we're going to go into the in-depth theory of what is that eighth spirit and what does it compose of. Again, if you are on my podcast under Spotify or Anchor, I'm under Drin Anu. So it's very important to understand what this Kabbalah or the Pa'u Netaru means to us. So earlier in our discussion, we were talking about spears. Again, you're starting off as zero. That is the supreme subjective being. That is quietness without a thought, not even a single thought. Because then, as we were speaking of in our last presentation, you get to being objective, because that's when a lot of things come in your mind, and then you start moving, and then you have subjective little beings going around you, and that multiplication of what I said before, times that energy by 2. Again, there's 256 sets in the trees of life. We're only speaking of this one, which is Uman. In the Bible, it speaks of it differently as an Amen. This is pronounced Umen. Amen. Feel that energy. So, as you can see, this chart is very, very colorful. I want to make sure you understood what all this was going to catch up to. This is what we call your chakras. So that we put those up there so you guys can understand the chakras and the alignments that comes into you. Then we get to break it down the systems of man's body. He has a lot of systems. That's why it's important to understand what the 256 sets are and how the trees of life change and how and what we're made of. So, very important to stay tuned. So right here again, this is going to be your root chakra, your sacral, your solar plex. It gets into your heart, your throat, then your third eye, and then you have this Horus eye around you, which I can call your senses, which leads back to what we were speaking about earlier when we talk about the supreme being by itself. But when it becomes conscious and it starts moving out into that objective realm, and it has all these subjective thoughts, it's starting to cling on to so many things. Again, as we spoke of, it starts multiplying, all the way from that little atom. Now it's just building all upon Like again, it's like displaying that as a Lego set. Well, let's get back to the Pa'unataru, and as I mentioned before, it's known by other names, Kabbalah. The netters, these are what we call the netters. So I did put them into this chart. You can see the same illustration on the board. Actually, this doesn't help. So in this chart, we're just basically naming the netterus out. So the netters are Usar. Number 2 is Tahuti. When we speak about Tahuti, we'll go into that later because it is the beginning before we had Tefnut and air. Tefnut was the water, and then Shu was the air. We'll go back and describe that a little bit later when we talk about the temperaments and how they play when it comes to the water, the fire, and the air, and all four elements working around us. The chart I'm looking at right now, just so you're not getting sidebarred, is this chart put together, which again, Tefnut, water, Shu is the air and the heat in this chart, moves around. So we have moist and dry, hot and cold. And again, this is how the temperaments move around. This could be emotional as well too. That's why you need to know always what season you're in individually. That's why it's important to know yourself. This chart again, so we have Tahuti. Number 2, number 3 is Sekert, or Shekim, or you can call them Ku, different names. Again, we are working on the Umen tree of life, Pa'unetaru, or the Kabbalah. This chart goes way high. But since we're in Uman, and the Greeks would refer them to Osis, Isis, and Osiris' children, this is the creations of life in the beginning. Okay. Again, Usar and Uset and another tree of life was where this tree of life came from. I like to look at it as Metatron. And you want to say Jesus or Yahweh or Ra was able to come down in a human body form and walk the earth. So that's how we look at the different trees of life and the embodiment in which we can see how many times the Creator has touched earth in its being. Okay? So Mayat being number 4, Haru, Kahuti number 5, Haru 6, 7 is Heteru, 8 is Sebek, 9 is Uzet, and 10 is Geb. Why is this important? All right, so as we break down the spheres of man's life, so as we're looking at this chart over here, as you can see at the top we have the 0. Okay, so with that 0, we have, like I said before, it is a supreme subjective being. Okay, so within that sphere, these are the faculties of man's spirit. So it has already been said that man's true essential and original being is composed of an energy and matter that is devoid of limitations. So if you hence decipher, 0 symbolizes the absence of conditionings and limitations characterizing the essential state of energy and or matter, which can neither be created nor destroyed, as we know well from Western science. Then we go into the first sphere. Again, that's Usar. And the first sphere corresponds to man's self-identity. Okay? Within the man's self-identity, as we are speaking of the perfected, full, evolved man, her identity is with 0. It's moving data. So, an essence of her being is unconditioned and it's unlimited in its creative capacity. In other words, there is no identification with any personality complex that is characterized by specific human preferences, likes, dislikes, or inclinations. Okay? Again, we are on this chart to give you more of a broad idea of who we're speaking of. So when we get into, again, this first sphere, which is moving around, okay? There are no sexual classes, there's no races, there's no occupation, there's no nationality, there's nothing there. So there is no condition in which it can start putting itself together in any kind of reflective pattern other than in the spirit and forces which it is individually embodied in. So in everyday life, that means that this person will not be controlled by unconditioned responses. He will be totally free of the control by his dislikes, loves, hatred, fear, anger, and the whole host of emotions and desires. Okay. Now, each personality type is a pattern of conditioned ways of thinking and emotional responses. As I said, they're all its own emotional beings and responses. This is why I want to make sure you guys continue to pay attention to the chart when it comes to the roots of chakras. As you can see, they're color coordinated around as well. Pay attention to the colors and signs around you. They are eventually going to start connecting the dots as to why we think and move the way we do in this human body. All right. So moving forward, the individual who has attained to the realization of her essential nature, zero, and the spirit one, is able to change personalities and changing situations on demand. Her, or we see here, the self identity with the unstructured state of the subjective energy matter composing the spirit at the first sphere level, they call Ba. In the Kemetic tradition, an individual who has attained to this level of development is called Usar. Okay. Alrighty. So these are the faculty of man's spirit. The tree of life as a guide to man's spirit of the man's mind. And that's why I want to make sure it's important that we understand the tree of life and each sphere in which is in our bodies, how it is broken down into its organical systems, and what each function of that system is. Again, we're like a train. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? So we got to make sure we're moving all of those bodies in and out, making sure they are all working systematically the way they are supposed to be working. Although it may look like I have one body, inside I have 7, maybe 13, maybe more. The point is to know how all these systems collectively work when it comes to working with your brain. As we spoke earlier, that pineal gland. Okay? All right. So, alrighty. So let me just go back and jump to, again, we are on the Meta Netaru and graduating chapters right here. Right now we're on the ending of chapter 6. So I'm going to back up a little bit on chapter 6 so that we fully understand what that Pa'u Netaru, or the Kabbalah, or the Neters, or the Yorubas, or the Orishas, or what the Westerns would say, deities, or angels, are doing in our body, okay? What they created. What did the celestial workers do? These right here are the celestial workers, 7, 8, and 9. So each one of these has its own set of divinity within its own nature. And then we're going to break that down as well. You can see how these actually have their own connection. And then again, we have 7, which has its own connection too. Okay? Each one of those sets. So right now I'm following on. Those who are listening to my podcast, we are doing this in a live session as well. You'll see that on the recording on my channel, so go ahead and stay tuned for that. Those of you who are tuned in, you can also re-listen to this literature either on here, or you can go to my Spotify channel under Drin Anu, or Anchor Drin Anu Meter as well. So now, podcast listeners, I told you we're going to get into that 8th sphere. Again, so we're going to go into that creative activity and what all this does for us. So this is going to be very, very, very interesting. So I'm just going to erase this little corner section right here, because we all know what this means. Then we're going to break down these numbers. I put this in the illustration. Go ahead and say what that means to me so you guys understand why we have a stop sign up here. Red, of course, it means stop, root, something around going on. Yellow, of course, means slow down. That's your solar complex is telling you. And of course, green, that's your heart, will tell you to go when you can go, because sometimes you may not be able to breathe. Which is also really cool. I kind of put this in the game. There's that game Simon Says. Well, your creator didn't say it's time for you to move. Or your body said maybe you should slow down. Or there may be something at the root as to why things aren't moving for you financially, mentally, period, that you need to stop and reevaluate your life again. Pay attention to these signs and these symbols that are all around you, because they are connecting these dots very well. And the more you connect your dots around you, the more you're able to connect more into your universe, into your galactical minds. So again, red, yellow, green, we see that the stop sign tells us when we should go and proceed, slow down, or run, go faster, or again, like we say, it's your turn, go ahead and go. At any one of these directions, you do want to make sure you proceed with caution and think before you move, okay? So we're going to erase that off of here. I just thought that was really cool to put on there. And then we're going to go into describing the correspondence, and you're in that zero realm. You have unlimited resources. Again, in that zero realm, you're not saying anything. You are in your supreme being. You're not thinking anything. You're just chilling. You're chill mode. It's like the best state of meditation is to try to clear the mind as much as you can without even a single thought. Okay? All right. Because your resources are unlimited. Now you get to thinking, you can start moving around a little bit there. That's fine. So we call that first sphere God or man or the likeness of God. Okay? God or man or the likeness of God. Okay? Likeness, as we said in Genesis 1:26 through 27, it is the likeness of God. Okay? All right. So the likeness of God. Then we get into the third sphere, which is, the second sphere, which is the will. Okay? The will. Okay? This is your crown right here. Okay? This is your wisdom. This is your will. This is your power. This is you with legs on. Hold your big old head up. Okay? Picture this being a big old circle. Somebody with a big old head. Okay? That's you. Because all that is in your pineal gland. As I mentioned this earlier, your pineal gland is like moving into a third eye. You will know consciously where you're at in your surroundings and when you get to moving around. Okay, so again, 2 is your willpower. Number 3, we have what they call make, or that's your spiritual power. Okay, so we have your will. 3, we have your power. Okay, when you get into your 4th sphere, that's more like I was saying with Mayat. She's your balance. She's the one that kind of keeps you on top of things and make sure you understand her laws, which she has 42 laws and principles. We'll be going through that later. So right here, we're going to talk about laws. Okay? Because you came in with your crown, you got your wisdom, your will, and you have power. But depending on where you're at, you're going to have laws to wherever you can't restrictively go. But then again, you have your power to go anywhere within your will, and you're wise enough to know how you're moving around. So the 4th, we're going to get in and we're going to call it laws. Okay, these are your laws. We get into the 5th sphere, where which will be enforced, is what it says. So, as we spoke earlier with the creations of life, we're speaking about how these creators are coming into being in each day of life of creation. So we have 6 acts of creation. Okay, so within those 6 acts, this is what was going on in those 6 acts of creation. In each dynasty or in each tree of life, this was what was being created before humans. So again, when I say when you're thinking about this kind of concept, the perception of the Metu-Neteru, you are a robot having to be reprogrammed. There's nothing you don't know other than who and what am I doing with all these. I'm going to explain to you how and what to do with all these. So keep moving. So we have laws, and on the 5th side, we have what we call the enforcers. Those are the ones who are going to start enforcing and moving objects to where they need to be to start getting into your omni science, right? Because I'm present. Now let's be a little bit more potent here, okay? All right. So they're going to start enforcing. Or we can call them the enforcers, okay? So 5 would be enforcers. All right, so number 6. 6 is like a divinity. It's like going through, to me, I like to say the stake. The metu meka. It's not only the word that gives you the power, but it's also your, some say angels, deities, netarus, faculty. This is your creative staff, your systems working inside of you to help you be the best you can be. To tell and show you that you are already the best you can be. So number 6, we call them the coordinators, okay? They're assisted by essentially located in the coordination of, okay, the cosmogonical charts of what we speak about on the podcasting. We're on the 8th sphere, okay? So these again would be called the coordinators. Okay, so now we're going to coordinate all this together. Start making some things put together, start making some things work, okay? See what goes with what, see what doesn't fit in, see what other miraculous stuff we can start creating. It's like the techno side of God's creation. So start being more technological way. You know, we have the science, we have the technical now, then here comes, of course, our engineering, you know, and all this is nothing but math, you know. So it's a great step within itself, I'd say. So then we get into number 7, okay? Number 7 in that Pa'unataru, or the tree of life, is called the designers. This is where we get really crafty with all these materials we have, you know? So now that we know what we can do with it, we're forcing the pieces that are getting together, the ones that actually start moving things, you can move that now. You can use this, you can use that, you know. Then now we have the coordinator saying, okay, we got this going. It's like running a warehouse in a way in your body. And now we have the ones that are going to sit there and start designing this craftsmanship, okay? Designing, putting all this to its perfection, okay? So we call them the designers. So over here, designers. All right, so now we're on number 8. Okay, so number 8 is Seker. So with Sebek. Sebek. Keeping them as confused. This is Seker, this is Sebek. They're on the same timeline, but I need to make sure I get this right. As do you, because it could be a lot to remember when it comes to putting all these in order. It's like literally algebra. Then you get into parts of math I wasn't able to pass when I was in high school. I'm like, I can't get over this. To me, if they would explain it this way, it might have been easier for me to get to that calculus or that trigonometry, so I can actually really latitudinally point myself in the direction of my life of where I need to be, like reading my own Basi chart or something, you know? Yes, I'm celestially inclined. But not to go off track. So we have the 8, which again is Sebek, and she is the technician. All right. So again, we're putting stuff together. So Sebek right here, Sebek will be the technician. How that if I can spell again today. Technician. Okay. She's trying to put things together. Ready? And now we're getting into all that. It's like a woman having a baby. All that goes in line. That one part of the pineal gland. Now everything around it is being formed to such a beautiful thing. Now here comes the labor. Okay? So 9 is considered the divine womb. Okay? So now it's like baking a cake. We put everything, all that I want to put in there, little analogy. And now I'm about to bake it. It's going to come out now, okay? So we call 9 through my divine womb, okay? Through my divine womb. Okay? So you've seen the picture I illustrated earlier. It was almost as if within that pineal gland, within that brain, within that reptilian to the vegetable aliens, we can see how each segment of creation was created before humanity, and the complexity and the awesomeness behind the craftsman of our creator. Thank you, God. So now we're going to go into 10, and 10, it's like earth, like yep. Now it's being, like I said before, it's coming out into the world. It's living now. It's having to go into, like we say, worldly events. So now we have the world. So we're going to call number 10 world or worldly. Okay? Awesome. So there's another way of corresponding to this chart. This is like, again, where we start putting our spirits together. It's like another game we can play. Putting your sets together, setting them up.